good afternoon and welcome to BMCP. I think we are now at edition 7 or 8. The topic today is, I forgot the title, oh my God. Sorry. The topic today is the tokenized financial markets post-COVID-19 and with a very special focus on the UAE and Middle East region. We have a very interesting selection of panelists here from different areas in their expertise field. And before I would like to hand over to them and give them a short the chance to introduce them shortly, I would like to give you a short rundown how the whole event works. So we will have for the audience, particular attendees, as well some interactive elements where they can interact. One of the interactive elements is a kind of a survey. Throughout this 1 hour, we will post 5 different questions which are related to tokenization, and if you feel so, you can answer them. They are very easy to answer. Most of the questions are just like yes or no questions. Further, for the attendees, there's as well the chance to submit questions, and for questions we would urge you to use the Q&A function. You should see it at the bottom of Zoom. There's a button which is called Q&A. You can click on that and basically can address the question. We will try to answer them at most likely at the end of the session, but also if the questions are fitting during the whole thing in, we will try to answer them within the conversation. And last but not least, there is the chat. In the chat, feel free to just communicate. And please, if you use questions, it would be preferred if you not using the chat, it would be preferred if you use the Q&A function. Before we are starting with your introduction, Christian, do you want to give us a short welcoming words as well from your side, from Black Manta's side?
With pleasure. Thank you very much, Juergen, and thank you very much and a warm welcome to all our great panelists. And of course to our audience. I see we've a couple of usual guys from Europe and Asia and also US, but of course a lot of new guys from the UAE and Middle East region. Now, we as Black Manta Capital Partners, we are broker dealers based in Germany, and we work in the European Union within a regime that's called MiFID II. We do tokenization as a service, so we are actually in the process of bringing any kinds of assets, be it property, real estate, or equity, or other participation rights, so debt rights into startups, SMEs, or corporates. We do this with a license since last year, and we've been creating a network of corporations actually around the world, from the US to Asia, and we had more and more conversations with our friends on the panel today also about the Middle East. And recently I've been with Kokila on a great panel by the Arab Monetary Fund about what's going on in the Arab League nations and how Arab League legislators and regulators are seeking to find the proper regulation to get this market going. I think last comment on that introduction, I think the tokenization of assets in general will be a great tool, a great way to bring the global financial markets closer together and to find standards in order to better interact internationally and integrate with the different active regions in the world. That's what we are here for to do, and that's what we do in this format in BMCP.live, in bringing people from different parts of the world together on what we do.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your words. And as we're all gentlemen, ladies first. So Kokila, could you give us a little bit of a short introduction? Maybe just keep it like 2 to 3 minutes, because everyone else would like to make an introduction as well.
Yeah, I know we're going to keep it 2 minutes.
Yes, that's perfect.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, different parts of the world. Welcome to UAE. Thank you, BMCP, for organizing this webinar. And my name is Kokila Alagh. I'm the founding partner for KARM Legal Consultants. We're a law firm based out of UAE. We say we're a homegrown UAE firm that is looking at the tech segment, specifically started with clients in the tokenization space using of blockchain technology and moving on to other technologies, especially in the fintech. We have partnership offices in Malta. We're based out of, as I said, in UAE and as well as in UK. And most of the clients and the regulatory practice that we have is everything to do with technology, and we are there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kokila, for your very good introduction. I would like to continue with Mohammed. Mohammed, could you give us a short introduction from your side, please?
All right, thank you. Well, thanks for having us here today, and welcome everybody. My name is Mohammed. I'm the founder and CEO of Deka4. Deka4 is a consultancy company based in the UAE, and we're specializing in providing consultancy services to companies to conduct security token offering. We, glad to have partnered with like Manta, and we're working closely with Kokila and others in the industry. And the objective of our company is to navigate the complexity of the tokenization and help companies take that journey through. Now we focus on certain part of the business cycle, which we will cover through this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. James, your turn, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Bernard. I'm head of corporate sales for DMCC. We are a free zone licensing authority in Dubai. Our mandate, if you like, is to create trade flow through Dubai, and that's been for the past since 2002. And now we're up to around 17,000 companies that we provide licensing services to, visas, and a lot of other services and products and platforms. And over the last years, we've become very involved in blockchain and of course, cryptology and everything that goes with it. And we see it as part of our mandate now to create this ecosystem for the industry to attract companies from around the world to feel that this is their hub.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, Saeed, a very famous person known in the crypto space. Could you give us as well some introduction?
Thanks, Juergen. Thanks, everyone. Good to see familiar faces here on the panel. I'll just give you a bit of background on what I'm doing, what I have been doing. So previous to being in the blockchain and the crypto space, I used to work for one of the largest global sovereign wealth funds, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. So that traditional investment background served me well. And I could see that crypto and digital assets was the future. This started 4 years ago. A big believer in the technology, big believer in fintech as well. And I feel that the benefits that blockchain technology can bring to real assets and converting them, the ownership of those assets onto blockchain has some real incentives there. So I was a co-founder of Alphabit Crypto Fund, which is a regulated crypto fund focused on crypto assets. And then this year I set up a blockchain consultancy company called eGovern, focused on large organizations such as governments and corporations on helping them develop blockchain solutions for their activities and services. Very excited about that. I think a lot of large organizations are very seriously looking at the technology and how to use it and really want to use the technology. So we want to be a one-stop solution for them to be able to access the latest technology and the latest tech providers out there as well. Something that might be more relevant to the discussion here is I'm also strategic advisor to Digital Asset Exchange, which is an Abu Dhabi-based startup regulated by the Abu Dhabi Global Market, the FSRA. And they will be able to trade, you'll be able to trade virtual assets, if you like, which is what the regulational framework refers to as digital securities. So Anybody that has tokenized assets locally can trade it on the DEX, which is the digital asset exchange. So that's the infrastructure there. You have the DMCC, which is another jurisdiction where you can get a license to be able to use the tokenized assets. Kokila with KARM can give you the legal guidance that you need. Also, Mohammed, Mahfoudh with DECA 4, they can give you the consultancy support that you need to be able to set up a new security token offering. So I think the infrastructure and ecosystem here in the UAE is very well developed, and I think it's a good jurisdiction for a lot of companies to seriously look at establishing here. Sorry about the long intro.
No, it's a very, very good intro. I think it gives the audience as well a good idea that basically, as we are talking, like for us, it's like as well, why we're doing the BMCP is like to realize what are the ecosystems. And I think what is very important at the moment is exactly what you were saying, that there are different players in the ecosystem and different players have different roles. And I would really like jump straight into it. So what is the actual situation in the UAE? So, for us, it's like we know, for example, how it's in Europe, but for example, Kokila, I think you are like very well established in the UAE and also regions around. So can you give us a short overview? How does it look locally in terms of regulation? Is it possible to do things?
Yeah, sure, Juergen. So just to, before we start, so if you look at the panel itself, we have a regulator, we have somebody who's been investing into the crypto space for the longest time, and we have a tokenization expert, and you have a law firm. So I have personally seen in the last 2 years how these webinars have changed. Now we're actually talking about projects that are happening on ground over here. We're no longer having conferences where we're just talking about this is what we should be doing. Rather, we now move to the space where we're saying, hey, this is what we are doing in the region. So James would be the best to answer you more about what's happening in UAE with him, especially on the DMCC. But what I would like to also tell you, as in the event, as Christian mentioned, that where we were a month back, it was very welcoming to see that the regulators, legislators, governments, everybody's vision is to look at, so if we talk about the vision 2030 from Saudi or for UAE's vision of that it should be a blockchain enabled country by 2020. So we started from the top, so which is the governments looking at that vision, making the regulators, legislators work in it, and the market force also work together in it. It's taken its time. Now is the time, as we say, that we're absolutely ready because the ecosystem is ready. You have various service provider. It's no longer that a client coming to us 2 years back was like, I've heard about security tokens. How does it work? Now they're actually coming and saying, hey, we know that these are the successful token launches that happened. That's how they did the fundraise. Is it same as a security? So the questions have changed, which just shows that the market has matured. And specifically, I would like to thank all the regulators across the region who've taken that leap of faith and saying, we're gonna make it technology enabled. So the advent of where we've seen many sandboxes or innovating testing lab initiative coming from DIFC or from FSRA or from SAMA or from the Central Bank of Bahrain, allowing all these new technologies to be tested. So it's no longer just a vision, but it's actually happening now. So the market is ready, where experts from all over the world are looking at that. How do they move and do, for the first time, as I always say in this region, a pure knowledge transfer. So we're not just talking about coming and selling products from outside, but what the region made products which are going out. DEX, Alphabit are some of these examples that the region.
So if I'm asking you, so like you're seeing as well, like a local, how to say that, ecosystem developing, which is not just like someone coming in and selling existing systems, but people are like, for example, like Saeed said, there's a local exchange. So people locally developing as well products which are serving the industry instead of just taking someone else's stuff.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of local market penetration. There is a lot of local knowledge awareness that has been made, and especially to, most of the panelists who've taken this upon themselves, I think around 2-3 years back, to bring about the awareness and education around how these new tokenization concepts are going to work. So it's no longer just looking at investment, but actually looking at how these products are being made specifically say, let's start from within UAE or Bahrain, for example.
Thank you very much, Kokila. And James, because maybe you were explaining before, like the DMCC, so that's a special economic trade zone. So what is the purpose or the function of something like DMCC in the greater scheme in the region for tokenization, for example?
Sure, yeah, thanks. Exactly what Kokila was saying, and Saeed, it's not one of us that can make this work. It's a whole group effort of what the UAE is doing, and all of the different government, semi-government and private bodies that are working together to achieve this. The DMCC, of course, is doing its bit. And as I said, we're a licensing authority. So we act as the government, as the free zone authority for people who want to set up a company in Jumeirah Lakes Towers. And that can be in any activity that are listed. There are 950 plus. We're around 17,000 companies at the moment. And over the years, we've created different ecosystems, exactly what we're trying to do now with the cryptographic ecosystem. We've done it for the diamond sector, the gold sector, the tea sector. We're doing it now for the coffee sector, which is really interesting because we have a roasting facility, but now we're discussing with Amazon about the blockchain, using the blockchain for traceability of coffee. So it's all tying together really nicely and very interestingly. So we are now developing in DMCC with our partners from Switzerland who did the job of creating Crypto Valley so well over there, CV Labs and CBBC. We're creating our own ecosystem in Almas Tower in the DMCC, but that's open to everyone. So we want everyone to be part of this. And in that, we'll have an incubator, accelerator, co-working space, training, mentoring, and we'll provide licensed activities for all of the different parts of the cryptographic ecosystem. But what's important there is, and Saeed touched on it as well as Kokila, it's the regulator. So we have to work with different regulators, and the regulator for us is the Securities and Commodities Authority. So they are drafting crypto asset regulations, which are broken down into security tokens and commodity tokens at a higher level. Yeah. And once those regulations are finalized and in place, then as an economic zone, a free zone, we hope to be able to develop license activities for those activities. And those activities are pretty much people promoting, offering, issuing crypto assets across these different activities. And that's crypto custody services, operating in crypto fundraising platforms, crypto asset exchanges. I mean, the mandate is huge. It's so we're all really excited, and I think it's not long before the Securities and Commodities Authority come out with this final draft that we can all have a look at.
Saeed, I have a question to you because I'm assuming you're very well connected in the global financial industry. So how do you see like this emergence of this new technology, like tokenized securities, tokenized commodities? So is this something which is a chance for the local region to be competitive against something like a London, like London, New York, or if the Asian market, if you think about financial markets?
Yeah, I think if you look at financial markets globally, I think, you know, like in the UK, in London, or in New York, or in the States, you know, they have well-established, long history exchanges that are out there and established. And actually, they had a huge growth once they actually started to utilize the latest technologies with their trading on their exchanges. So in the same instance here, if the UAE exchange or the UAE exchange startups utilize blockchain technology and also utilize, you know, being able to trade virtual assets, which is not available on those larger exchanges that are more focused on traditional assets, then I think that will give good publicity to the UAE, and that will encourage, you know, all these companies that are tokenizing their assets to list those assets on the virtual exchanges here. So I think that's different. So it gives a good alternative. It's not competing exactly as per se with those large exchanges out there. So so it levels the playing field a bit, if you like.
Do you
I think, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
So do you see like these new technologies allowing like the UAE to leapfrog basically, because they not have, you know, like depth in terms of technology, because they now can set up something new and then they're basically ahead of everyone else? Or do you see it like they need still to learn something?
Yeah, I think using the new technologies, I think definitely accelerates the growth of the economy in general here, and it also increases the competitiveness of the entities that are using the latest technologies, that are giving them the best benefits, making them more efficient, more competitive. So I think, you know, utilizing these technologies can only be a good thing, and will also accelerate the level of growth and makes it more competitive compared to other economies and other countries. So I definitely am a big believer in using technology as an enabler. I think it has an exponential growth effect. So let's see how that goes over the next few months, over the next few years. But I'm confident that you'll see a very fast growth here. The one area I think where you'll see most of the tokenization of assets, and you've heard some rumors in the local market here, for example, one of the biggest organizations in Emaar, which is the largest property developer in Dubai, you know, we've heard rumors about them looking at blockchain, using blockchain. So I wouldn't be surprised if they come out with an asset which is utilizing blockchain and a tokenized assets in terms of a kind of one of their new developments, perhaps, or maybe one of their existing properties. So I wouldn't be surprised if something big comes out from that specific area locally. But in general, I think real estate is also a big market here in the UAE and in the region. That's the most invested asset class, and I think there's a lot of benefits that blockchain can give to tokenizing real estate as well.
Thank you very much. And I would like to hand over the discussion to Mohammed. Mohammed, in our pre-discussion, you mentioned you are yourself as well like a early stage angel investor, and you specifically are interested in security tokens because you think there's a big potential where there's at the moment a missing market in the UAE region. Could you explain us this a little bit more?
Sure. Let me carry on what Saeed just mentioned. See, I mean, I believe UAE and the region has an advantage over London, New York, and the established markets, because whenever there is a new technology that is coming, usually at places where there is, it is less, you know, the current system is not as efficient as an established place. The concept of the incremental utilities, for example, where, you know, for an established market to jump to that new concept, there is a lot of course, there's a lot of challenge for them. But for a new market to jump, you know, to leapfrog and use the latest technology to establish a new framework. So I think that's what we will be seeing here in the UAE, in the Middle East, where you have a country, let's say UAE, but also the neighboring countries, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. UAE is committed to innovation, to blockchain, AI. Recently, with the new restructuring of the government, they introduced the Ministry of Technology. So it gives a place, and we have this probe to Mars and tomorrow. So these are, it's not, you know, vanity dreams. These are setting up a new structure. You know, the world is coming to a new phase, and UAE is positioned to get there for various reasons. So number one is a government that's pushing for technology, regulation, as Kokila and James are mentioning, which they are, you know, more equipped to talk about it, but we are seeing all of that. Now coming to the startup, but startup is not the only industry that will benefit from tokenization. It's just an area that I'm more familiar with. So the ecosystem in the Middle East in terms of the startup angel investment has lots of challenges. One of the challenges is exits, for example, access to capital. Most startups fail because they cannot raise money in the second or third round. And you know, the issues of cash flow, which usually they need a continuous fundraise, and they cannot raise money in the second round because the initial seed investors do not see the exit fast enough. I mean, we're not in a market where exits are frequent. Only certain players who have that opportunity. So we see the tokenization as a platform for that particular industry and the real estate. Real estate is definitely, you know, it's a very illiquid market. We get tricked, or, you know, I mean, UAE has seen, let's say, in the last 20 years, a high growth in the real estate, and that created a false assumption with the investors that real estate is liquid, because 15, 20 years ago, they would flip the real estate and they make money quickly, but that's not a real economy. Real estate is not liquid. So now they are sitting on big assets. As we say, they are cash poor, asset rich. They cannot move it. Tokenization could unlock. RERA, about a year ago, I don't know, Kokila can comment on that, has introduced new regulation to allow fractional ownership. So even the real estate regulatory framework is getting prepared. I personally believe UAE in particular, the region specifically, will benefit and leapfrog in terms of this new industry. Regulators are moving very fast. Actually, they're moving faster than the local environment. When we talk to the companies, they're still more hesitant than the regulators, to be honest, but it's an education, it's a progress. So we have a market that the angel, for example, the startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem needs a lot of work. Governments are pushing aggressively. In Saudi Arabia, you have more funding available to startups than actually what startups can consume, that many economies would love to have. So these are the things that we see tokenization will add huge value to.
So we see basically the UAE has different points where, or the region has different points where tokenization can basically help and solve existing problems. So Kokila, everyone is mentioning you to be the person which knows the regulator, because I'm assuming you're familiar with law. So can you give us like more details about how does the regulation look? So am I at the moment able to do something like a security token offering in the region?
Yes, as James mentioned, that we have it from our federal authority, from Securities and Commodities Authority in UAE. Pretty soon, they came out with a consultation paper last year where they looked at security tokens as well as how do tokenization of commodities. So that's why it's a unique blend where they will be working closely with DMCC, as we understand. In the meantime, we've also had some really good experience working with other regulators like ADGM and DFSA here in UAE, where we've had the pleasure of working in a sandbox environment where we're looking at unique platforms where there's a crowdfunding platform issuing security tokens, where the projects are doing the fundraising, the campaigns are as security tokens. And we've had quite an interesting conversations with the regulators, and they've been at the forefront, as Mohammed said, that now there's a shift where the regulators are way advanced and they're accepting these new technologies. So they're, okay, if we do not even have a laid down framework, but till the time a share can be shown, a share issued using blockchain technology can be shown as a share certificate, the regulator is fine with it. So going back to, from a regulator's point of view, it's more about, has the AML KYC been taken care of? Is the privacy laws? Is the data protection? Is the customer protection, investor protection? All these angles being looked at, the regulators are ready. So yes, UAE is not saying no to anybody right now in this space till the time these parameters are kept in place. Mm-hmm. And also in the other countries, as Mohammed also mentioned, in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, that we're seeing that they've taken the forefront. And there is capital available. There are many projects who would definitely benefit from, so be it commodities like say coffee or tea, and then again, gold is another one, and oil and gas is an industry that will benefit from it. So the market's ready for it. Yeah.
I would like to spin the question now back to Christian, because Christian, as we know, we know us very well, and we have observed different markets. So how do you think the ecosystem at the moment is from an outsider's, so sorry for saying it this way, from an outsider's perspective seen in the UAE? So when do you see this taking off, or what else is needed that things are blossoming?
Well, I think, yeah, I'll just check it if I'm on mute. Well, I think you can answer that very generally, and this applies to the UAE and the Middle East like it does apply to Europe, US, or Asia. Kokila mentioned before, there was a phase when we were just talking, and especially lawyers were talking in conferences with a couple of technicians, and a lot of software companies have been developing tokenization engines. And we always say at the moment there are more tokenization engines out there as there are security token exchanges and primary market offers. So there is a strange unbalance in the market. Now we are in phase 2 where something actually has happened by regulated broker dealers like Manta actually created a primary market where the first security token exchanges take off, like Saeed mentioned, DEX, to whom we are also talking in Abu Dhabi. We're also talking to guys from Archex in London. There is SIX in Zurich. There's a lot going on in Germany with Stuttgart and Frankfurt and others around the world. With Hussein in Hong Kong. Now, the third phase I want to talk about is basically, we can do this now. We've convinced regulators, be it with a dedicated legislation or be it simply by applying existing capital market laws in an analog way. But what it takes for the next step for phase 3 is actually an ecosystem with different layers of players. Now, we got the question from the audience about the secondary market. Actually, at the moment, there are a lot more secondary market projects than primary market projects. So what's happening now is single offers, like bigger ones like the EMARs go out and try to make a token offering, or a venture fund goes out and tries to make an offering. But this is basically happening on single instance platforms and not on primary market platforms. And the secondary market projects that are out there, they are looking desperately actually for offerings and tokens to list, coming from the security token space.
May I interrupt you? What by secondary market you're meaning exchanges are looking for projects to list on them? Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. And then again, if I may elaborate 2 more things. In the secondary market space, you have the exchanges, the big ones, like where we hope that London, Frankfurt, Zurich and Co will establish security token markets next to the single projects we see around the world. The other layer actually, then there are other, one more thing, there are other secondary marketplaces, there are MTFs, there will be bilateral trading facilities for smaller offerings. Like when you have a 10 million real estate, like let's say at some condos or a share of a department store or whatever, a mall in Dubai tokenized, this won't end up in an exchange. That has to be a bigger volume. So this will be traded on some kind of other secondary market or on a BTF on the actual offers page. But the next layer that's also important for the ecosystem to develop, that's custody. Now, there are all kinds of custody solutions out there. From you have your MetaMask wallet as an individual investor. And when you go to Germany, there are like almost 40 projects now applying for a crypto custody license because Germany has introduced legislation there. So it's very important for the market because custody, regulated custody, will empower professional investors. So professional investors, accredited investors, institutionals, they want basically a regulated financial service provider, a regulated bank, or somewhat kind of a new depot bank taking care of their deposits. Very few want to engage in the technical questions of how do we store our cryptos and our security tokens. So we have primary market players, secondary market players, the custodians, and then the investors, the professional investors that need to enable themselves in order to deal with these tokenized assets and the cryptos. Once we have all 4 of them together and engaged and working, then slowly, step by step, we go towards mass adoption and a real takeoff of the market. And there we are sure this will happen, but this will still take a couple of years to go there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And I would like to pass the ball to Saeed. Saeed, you mentioned you worked in a very professional, I call it always like government funds are like very non-agile, to be honest, if I'm saying this. So they invest very traditional. So how do you see this when people are talking about, there's a problem of a secondary market or and I think in your case, you were also like an early investor in different security issuing platforms. So what made you look into them and why did you think that there is a opportunity? Because, it's somehow a little bit different than traditional crypto market, for example.
Yeah, I think probably what you're trying to refer to these entities as is probably the institutional investors or institutional players, these large organizations that invest in different assets. So I think when it comes to institutional players, they would like to be taking part in an environment which is firstly regulated, secondly has good solutions to mitigate all the different types of risks. The only risks that institutions want to worry about is actually market risk, which is the movement of the price of the assets they're invested in. Any other type of risk, they don't want to really, they want to mitigate it or hedge against it. So if there is custody solutions, if there's a regulated platform to trade on and so on, then that's exactly what institutions are looking for. The reason why I invested in some projects which were aimed at this kind of tokenized assets space is because, you know, so like from when I went into the crypto asset space 4 years ago, it was mostly retail that made the asset class grow so exponentially, so fast. But then obviously there was a bubble. And now I think that the next reason for growth is actually going to be institutions, large institutions, putting money into this space. So without the right infrastructure being in place, I don't think these players will come into the market. But if you are investing in the types of picks and shovels companies that are supporting institutional players coming into the space, then you know, I think that's a good investment. And I think once the institutional investors start coming in and the market size grows, then that investment should come good. So
for me, it would be very interesting if you can answer the following question. So assumingly, you know, like I'm a large fund and I invest traditional in property, why would I move now into investing in tokenized property?
So as Mohammed touched upon, traditionally real estate is pretty much very illiquid. There's not much, you know, secondary market going on. You have to go through the traditional legacy systems in order to be able to sell your real estate, especially if it's a very large real estate. You need to, there's only a certain number of entities that can actually buy a certain size of real estate. And,
you mean, for example,
you know,
like a whole condo development or a whole shopping area or business district?
Generally, the larger the real estate size, the less liquid it is. So if you can fractionalize ownership of those large real estate assets and also have a liquid secondary market where those fractionalized ownership of that asset is easily tradable, then, you know, that makes that asset more liquid, and that's actually appealing to institutional asset owners. So I think it's the benefits are there. I think the institutions are now aware of the benefits. They just want to see more testing and more battle testing of that infrastructure that supports the secondary trading, and make sure that there's no big problems that arise. So once all those things are ironed out, then I think you'll see larger assets being tokenized and the use of the technology exponentially growing as well.
Thank you very much. And James, we have one question which is going, I think, directly to you, or you marked it. So how soon will SCA crypto regulation come out? Can you please explain what SCA means? Because not everyone in the audience is also familiar with that term.
Sure. It's the Securities and Commodities Authority. They are an onshore authority for the regulation of commodities and securities. They don't regulate financial free zones. They regulate non-financial mainland and DMCC clients, because we already have our own securities derivatives exchange called the Dubai Gold and Commodity Exchange.
Sorry, I mean, we need to take care about those people. By mainland, the understanding means like the UAE itself and not the special economic zones.
Yeah, there are a number of economic zones around the UAE. Some of them specifically financial, like ADGM and DIFC. They have their own regulatory environment. So they are growing their own crypto blockchain regulations. And for the mainland and potentially some of the non-financial free zones, the Securities and Commodities Authority will offer their regulatory oversight to them. And of course, with the DMCC, we already have that in place through our derivatives exchange, DGCX. So we have a lot of experience with them. So we're talking to them on an ongoing basis. You know, with everything that's been going on, they made remarkable progress. they're still confident that over the next, couple of weeks, few weeks, that something will come out in terms of the final draft of these regulations.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to pass the word back to Mohammed. So in your way, because you were coming out of traditional startups, so how do you see there, as we mentioned before, the ecosystem is growing, but also to the ecosystem in terms of the startup world talking with the regulator? Is there any relation to each other, or are they both more or less running parallel?
Well, I mean, okay, so the regulation is important because it gives comfort to the companies and the investors and make everything, smooth. Now, the startups and the investors in startups, let's say in comparison to institutional investor, they take slightly more risk. It doesn't mean they go and gamble. I mean, people sometimes when we present a startup, they compare it to a scam or a gambling. And that's, of course, not what we're talking about. Without people investing in early stage, we would not be able to talk right now on Zoom and having this, discussion. Technology needs lots of, very courageous or adventurous people. And there are. And people, usually the people we deal with, let's say they allocate part of their wealth to high risk ventures, and the remaining to, they have a portfolio from real estate to, general public equity and whatever it is. Now we're focusing on that domain where the tokenization itself as an industry is I don't want to use cliche terms, but let's say it's a disruptive and it's going to change the financial world. So to compare what we know 10, 20 years ago to this, I think we're missing a lot of opportunities. In my view, this tokenization will create a new type of investors that today they cannot participate, or they participate in a smaller scale. And startups will, tokenization can be, Amar can tokenize, anybody can, but usually startups take a little bit more risk. Let's say we hope it's calculated risk, and that's why companies like us and Black Manta make sure they go through the right process. So they don't gamble. And tokenization in itself does not generate money. So people, when they come and said, will we tokenize? It means that we'll get the funding. No, it's just a method. Now, tokenization will help startups unlock that illiquid asset. It's like Saeed said, the real estate, the larger it is, the more illiquid. And the business in the companies where the startups are more liquid than the late stage, companies. Even pre-IPO companies have more liquidity than, let's say, an early stage startup. So it's a matter of liquidity, exits, the options that you have. If these are available, then people will, like a place like UAE and Saudi Arabia, we don't have taxes, so there's no incentive for angel investors. In London, you have a huge tax benefit for angel investment. In Austria and Germany. So here you need to have incentives such as an exit, hopefully, transparency. These things will take time, but they are happening. UAE, for example, is very advanced in technology. KYC is one of the big issues. UAE has this UAE Smart Pass, which is a KYC. And tomorrow, if any smart fintech company connect that, you automatically have a properly government secured KYC. And then I'm sure somebody will build an AML concept, custodian. So, these bits and pieces of the puzzle are being built and things are happening. And the way we look at it, two asset classes, the startups and the real estate, will see more benefit because of the nature of liquidity that they have.
So to summarize it as well, so I think you talk exactly what I always try to explain to people as well. Like the tokenization per se is a framework which provides a secure and trustworthy environment to issue, let's say, digital shares. It's not because you're doing a security token that's making it easier to raise money, for example. It's just making it easier in the way to transfer it, and also in the way to be legally compliant. Is that what basically you are trying to express as well?
Yeah, I mean, see, okay, not every token needs to be fully compliant. I mean, it needs to be by the law. And if I convert a private equity, a small company and tokenize the shares, I mean, I don't need to get a legal regulatory approval, but I need to do it within the
Yeah,
frame.
it's basically not worse if you do like a $500 as like a $100,000 investment, seed investment. It should be not like a $10,000 legal process and I don't know, waiting 3 months to get it approved by the regulator.
But let's say the regulators have a main concern of the KYC. If you KYC, AML, if your contracts are by the standards of the government, then the company said, go ahead, do whatever is needed. Having a standardization, let's use the case of the Silicon Valley using the SAFE agreement, the simple agreement for future equity. That created a huge momentum, the convertible note scenario, and standardizing that, an ecosystem was created. So angel investors would invest very quickly. There is a standardized template. They don't need to have these very expensive lawyers, excuse me, Kokila. So you have a standardized template, an ecosystem was developed. So tax auditors, auditors, tax accountants will understand, is that an equity, is that these are very important to make it easy for a volume of investors, whether it's institutional or a retail. Regulation, the way we look at it, is to know what the government is looking for, to make sure that you're within that framework. It does not mean that you need to go and get an approval for everything you do. And so if I'm gonna go retail, of course, I need to get an approval from the government. And retail investors is very powerful. If I can reach out to the retail investors, it's a huge momentum. The Middle East has a high, I don't know the numbers right now, but the average saving for a middle class in the Middle East is very high. And this is an untapped market for tokenization. So you take all components, you have a huge potential. I mean, the whole world will benefit from tokenization. I believe where we are will have an advantage for various reasons. And the startups in particular will benefit more. But again, established companies, family companies, we're talking to some of the family companies or groups in the UAE where they don't need to raise money. They just want to tokenize their cap table to be ready, which is better route for them than going IPO, for example.
That's a good summary. Kokila, so how do you see like the next 2 years in the region? So what is your wildest dreams?
Wildest dreams would be to be with the vision of the government. Let it be the blockchain country of the world, and use case, the real use cases, as is rightfully pointed out by both Mohammed and Saeed, it's not just the illiquid market, the real estate, which has been the booming market for UAE in particular, but also looking at the new startups that we see here. And let's not forget that we are sitting at what is called the traders hub of the world. So UAE is known for trading. So we have a very large SME segment here. And they will benefit a lot from these tokenizations or the investments done in this process. And especially now in this, what we say, the post-COVID-19 era, where every business has been forced to look at a digital platform. This is the time when they will benefit from various investments, mechanisms, using these tokens, remembering that this is an means to an end. It's not the end itself. It just opens a new market for them. This is the time when we're seeing, especially UAE ministries being announced on cybersecurity, on remote working. So these are the initiatives which have been taken by the government, which boosts up the confidence in the economy and the vision of the country. So in the next 2 years, I'm sure, and it started already the last 2 months, it's exciting times. We're looking at great opportunities.
James, there's a question maybe I would like to address to you, and maybe you can answer it. So in accordance with Blockchain Vision 2021, we understand that the land department will be on the blockchain. Does this go as far as property rights transfer and distribution resolution on the blockchain? Do you have any experience on that topic?
I heard that they were also going to be on the blockchain, but maybe Kokila has an insight in terms of the legal.
There've been efforts, even on the, if not a fractional ownership law, but structures around those which have made it easier for, say, what we say, tokenization of the real estate. So land department is very open for discussions. So if there are great projects, they want to understand the technology, they want to understand how the titles will actually move there. So yes, there is a great progress.
I basically like if that is happening, you are definitely having a very unfair advantage, because I'm playing around with virtual lands and some virtual things, and just having this as an experiment to think about what you can do with real property is just amazing. If that's really like broad on the blockchain. The question will be how to do it, but I think once that is somewhere implemented, it's a complete game changer, I'm thinking.
Yeah, let me add to that as well. I think there's also in Georgia, they're using blockchain for land registry, and they're actually doing the transfer and the dispute resolution using blockchain, and it's many times more faster and more efficient, and the people who are using the service are very happy with it. So there is that that option that is live, and I'm sure if the Dubai Land Department want to use it, then there is solutions that they can use to put that into effect.
Okay, thank you very much. There's another question which is addressed to Saeed, and Saeed, don't you think the NMC healthcare company issue could have been mitigated or maybe not have been happened if we were using blockchain and tokenization, even though the ecosystem is regulated?
A good question. I think the issue, the scandal that happened with the NMC group was, it's what was actually more of an accounting fraud, whereby the debt and cash positions of the group was, not accurately reported. So it's a kind of a accounting reporting standards issue. Perhaps if the company or the group agreed to use blockchain and have those details available and stored on the blockchain, then the issue of whether the actual information is true or not, and if it's fraudulently presented, would be greatly reduced. So I think the question remains if it was on blockchain, would it have happened or not? I think it probably might still have happened, because there are ways to hide or misrepresent figures publicly. So even if they agreed to show their statements and reports publicly, it's still a question of, has somebody actually put the correct information there in the first place? So I think that issue is something where it's more like the actual people involved not doing that, rather than blockchain. But
it's more like a human error than a technology error.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like a human error than tech error. So I think, but maybe if they agreed to, maybe if there was a way of verifying that information using blockchain, whereby an independent auditor had to verify statements live and on the spot and have it visible publicly, then that issue wouldn't have arisen in the first place, possibly. But it's difficult to say.
James, I have a question to you, because how to explain that? I think you're the right person to ask it. So, because you're a free trading zone, so is it possible that I completely set up a company initially to be fully tokenized in your free trade zone, for example?
You mean as a sort of...
All my shares are digital, everything is done digitally, for example. Like basically there's, like I have tokenized shares.
Yeah, well, we're not quite there yet. We have our own rules and regulations in terms of shareholding, share capital, the actual types of shares that we actually use in the free zone. But, I think that's where things are heading. I think both Mohammed and Saeed spoke about it. It's all about fractional ownership, whether it's a commodity or a company or anything. And that's allowing both investment and getting investment opportunities on both sides. So I think on the free zone side of things, that's probably going to take a little bit more time. It's a sort of different class of share, if you like, to digitize. But I think the more important ones are the ones where we're going to see real use cases of. As was mentioned a bit earlier, there's a massive oversupply of creative ideas out there, which never come really to fruition. But that's great. That's like the .com age, isn't it? Everyone's trying. and eventually we'll adopt the ones which are rising to the top, I guess, and more suitable to where we are. I mean, the UAE, it was asked earlier to how the UAE is, and I don't think all of us know everything that's going on, and there's a load of stuff going on underneath that isn't visible to us that the UAE is doing. And the UAE is one of the best places in the world, one of the best positioned countries in the world to take advantage of blockchain and cryptology.
Christian, because we are coming to the end, so can you give us a little bit of an idea what Manta's plans are in the UAE and Middle East, or why you're looking into that space?
Well, let's wrap it up in two ways. Before I come on to our own aspirations, I'd like to say what I think we've learned in this hour today is that we all together develop a very complex ecosystem, and we're not just talking about the players in our own ecosystem itself, but also on secondary players like a land registry, like a registry of companies, like a national agency that gives out ID cards, and how we manage IDs, how we KYC investors. And in all these different parts of the ecosystem and the surrounding environment, we have the use of blockchain, we have the advantages of blockchain. So I think, again, like was said before, the UAE is perfectly positioned to go ahead with straightforward legislation and regulation. Also, legislation that convince the banks to be more straightforward in this sector, and not to be roadblockers in the ecosystem, but to enable different players and to engage with the technology and to embrace the technology. So, well, as I think it became clear today, we talked to all the players on the panel, on the board, and we'll be working with Mohammed and Kokila and the others on a handful of concrete projects. And when we talk about security offerings, there is a lot of things are possible. We can talk about regional offerings that are basically linked to a European market with feeders into a UAE offering. We can talk about setting up SPVs in Europe or in Asia to basically raise capital for UAE projects. So I think that's the whole vision. That's what the whole vision is about. We said in the beginning that we have a technology where really very few people now have understood how massive the change of the financial markets and the international cooperations within these markets will be. And this will be a story not for the next couple of years to go, but this is a story for this decade to be implemented. And in the end, we will for sure have a smaller financial world in terms of how we interact between different world regions and between different players.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And I think we going into the wrap-up round, and I would like to start with Kokila. So last chance to give us 2 minutes, like what would be, for example, your biggest wish for the whole security token industry in your local ecosystem?
To see all these regulations that we talked about, very excited to see the regulations which are going to come from ESCA, to see how these tokens can be issued, listed, traded, to see this entire segment grow further, and to see how we can actually move to the whole space that we talk about, globalization in this digital world. Mm-hmm. And how the word that we always use is interoperability, where different solution providers work with each other. We have those systems, we have the regulations, and these initiatives which are being taken by the industry experts who are sitting here, as well as from the government, all happening. So that's a big wish, and we see it happening. As I can say, that it is happening now.
That's great. Next one, James. So what are your closing words?
I'd say we're well on track. It does require a well-regulated environment, as we've discussed. It does require good custody solutions, which we're well aware of, having our own derivatives exchange. And I think the different authorities throughout the UAE are already working on this, and you have big support from people like Mohammed, Saeed, and Kokila, and myself, and DMCC, and all the other entities. So I think it's taking a bit of time, but that's very important. The damage that can be done is irreversible in terms of reputational damage. So it's very important to get it right and show that the UAE is a solid platform for people to come and invest into.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Saeed, you next. So what's your wish for the security token industry?
Yeah, I'll be very happy to see, you know, some very high quality performing assets being tokenized locally here, and then also being traded as well actively on the secondary markets via the exchanges that are going to come out in the ADGM. So I think once that happens, hopefully towards the end of this year or sometime next year, then that will be a big step, and that will really put the UAE and the region on the map, and that'll be really good publicity for the ADGM and the FSRA and the UAE as a country as well. So I'm very hopeful on those things happening. It might take some time, but I would really be very excited to see those things come to fruition.
Perfect. And Mohammed?
All right. One thing I would like, I mean, a dream for us, and that's something we're trying to do, is simplify the whole process to make it accessible to issuers, to companies that want to access capital, and to the investors. You know, I dream that, you know, the small investors, you know, the masses can have access to high quality investments, secured, you know, protected in a good way that they can participate in. So that's in a nutshell. Okay.
Christian, you as well? I didn't ask you for your wish.
Well, let's say my wish is that within the next 1 or 2 years, we are also down in the United Arab Emirates and have a presence, not just joining in from Europe, but also being in the UAE and the region on the ground, and help to develop that ecosystem around the world.
Perfect. And what is my vision? My vision, as always, is getting everything tokenized. So I like this conversation very much, where people were saying, yes, it's not only about tokenizing securities, it's also about how can we tokenize the land register, how can we tokenize basically identities. So I think it's getting more and more clear nowadays that the whole ecosystem basically is growing, and all these small elements which are still fragmented, getting somehow linked together. And that's very great to see. Thank you very much for the attendees to join us, and a very welcoming panel which we had here. And I think we could discuss another hour or 2 hours, and I'm hoping we will have once the chance to meet us all in person, because, you know, in times like this, everyone is doing online, but in person conversations are sometimes more easier, and the discussion is much greater. So for the audience as well, we will put the recording online, and if you're interested, you can share it, and you will find it on YouTube. And we are happy to see you in one of our next BMCPs, which will be, as far as I'm informed, I think it's end of the month, in 31st of July. Anyone, one last word?
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Shukran. Bye.
Bye-bye.